Aquarius, let me say this softly and clearly. This isn't about suddenly getting rich. This is about something far more personal. It's about the moment when the pressure you've carried for years, the financial stress you learned to live with, finally begins to loosen. January 2026 isn't bringing chaos. It's bringing relief. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. If you've been doing okay on the outside, while quietly worrying on the inside about stability, responsibility, about how long you can keep holding everything together, this message found you for a reason. Before we go any further, take a breath, and if you feel this already, leave a comment that simply says, "I'm open to receiving." Because what's unfolding for Aquarius isn't just about money changing. It's about a cycle ending and something steadier finally beginning. Aquarius, stay with me for a moment. There's a kind of pressure that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't knock loudly. It doesn't crash your life overnight. It just sits there quietly. Day after day. How long has it been since you carried a financial weight you never talked about out loud? Not because you were ashamed, not because you failed, but because explaining it would take too much energy you didn't have. This isn't about bankruptcy. It's not about losing everything. It's about that long, slow tiredness that settles into your body when money is always on your mind, even on good days. For someone like you, money was never just numbers. It became responsibility. It became family expectations. It became dignity, stability, the quiet promise you made to yourself that you would hold things together no matter what. You kept going while others assumed you were fine. You smiled through conversations where no one asked the deeper question. You learned how to survive without making noise. Here's something few people understand about Aquarius. You don't panic easily. You don't collapse when things get hard. You adapt, you think, you carry more than you show. But caring doesn't mean it doesn't weigh on you. There's a difference between being capable and being constantly braced for the next expense, the next responsibility, the next thing that depends on you. Sometimes the stress isn't dramatic, it's subtle. It shows up in how tightly you hold your breath when checking your account, in how you delay things you want for yourself, in how rest feels unfinished. And the hardest part is this: you rarely feel entitled to complain, because you know others have it worse. Because you've learned to be grateful even while exhausted. Let me ask you something gently. When was the last time you felt truly relaxed about money, not just managing it, but trusting it? That question alone carries information. This phase you've been in wasn't meant to break you. It was meant to teach you endurance, awareness, discernment. But no lesson is supposed to last forever. What you're sensing now isn't coincidence. It's the beginning of a release, not an escape. A release? The kind where pressure doesn't disappear overnight, but it stops tightening. The kind where you no longer feel like everything depends on you holding your breath. You're not behind. You're not late. You're not irresponsible for feeling worn down. You've been navigating a cycle that demanded too much self-control for too long. And as this story continues, something important begins to shift. Not outside of you first, but inside how you relate to value, security, and your own worth. If this part feels uncomfortably accurate, that's okay. It means you're listening honestly. Stay with me. Because what comes next isn't about pushing harder. It's about understanding why the pressure is finally starting to ease. Aquarius, there's something I want to say to you gently now, not as a lesson, not as advice, just as truth spoken slowly. The struggle you've been feeling was never about a lack of ability. If anything, it came from having too much awareness. You've always earned in a different way, through insight, through ideas, through seeing patterns before others do. You solve problems people don't even realize they have yet. But that kind of intelligence doesn't always get rewarded fairly in the world you're living in. Sometimes it gets overlooked. Sometimes it gets borrowed without credit. Sometimes it gets quietly consumed by systems that benefit from your clarity while offering you less in return. And over time, something subtle happens. You start adjusting your expectations downward. Not because you believe you deserve less, but because it feels easier than constantly explaining your value. You tell yourself things like, "I'm not motivated by money. I care about meaning more than income. I don't want to be pushy." All of that may be true, but it doesn't cancel the truth underneath. You were never meant to struggle just because you think differently. There's a pattern many Aquarians fall into without realizing it. You give more than you invoice. You think ahead without charging for foresight. You carry responsibility quietly, assuming it's just part of being capable. And when the return doesn't match the effort, you don't complain. You internalize it. You wonder if maybe you should try harder, learn more, be better, shrink your needs. But let me ask you something honestly. Have you ever noticed how often others lean on your ideas, yet hesitate when it's time to compensate you properly? That's not coincidence. That's a cycle. A cycle where your worth was measured through outdated lenses, where your contribution was treated as optional, even though everything depended on it. This is where the pressure really came from, not from earning too little, but from being misaligned with how your value was being exchanged. You weren't underperforming, you were under-recognized, and there's a quiet grief in that, the kind that doesn't scream, the kind that just leaves you tired. What's changing now isn't just circumstance, it's awareness. You're beginning to feel a subtle resistance to old dynamics, old agreements, old roles where you had to explain yourself or justify your needs. That resistance is healthy. It's the moment you stop negotiating against yourself. You don't need to become someone louder, or harder, or less humane. You simply need to stop shrinking your presence to fit spaces that never expanded for you. And as this awareness settles in, something else begins to loosen. The reflex to blame yourself. The habit of assuming it's your fault things didn't flow. You weren't lacking discipline. You weren't careless. You weren't unrealistic. You were ahead of your time in rooms that weren't ready to meet you. So if a part of you feels both relieved and unsettled hearing this, that's normal. Growth often feels like recognition before it feels like confidence. Stay here with me, because once this cycle is named, it can finally begin to dissolve. And what replaces it feels very different from struggle. Aquarius, there's a subtle shift you may already be feeling, even if you don't have words for it yet. It doesn't arrive like a breakthrough. It arrives like space. Like waking up one morning and realizing your chest feels a little less tight. Like noticing that the constant mental math has quieted, just enough for you to hear yourself think again. January 2026 doesn't change everything at once. It changes the way things press against you. For a long time, life felt like holding a door shut during a storm. Not dramatic enough to ask for help. Not calm enough to ever rest. You learned how to brace. How to anticipate. How to stay one step ahead so nothing would fall apart. And that skill kept you going. But it also kept your nervous system on guard. What begins to happen around this time is not magic. It's rhythm. A chapter that demanded constant vigilance starts losing its grip. The pace slows just enough for stability to become possible again. You may notice it first in ordinary moments. Bills that no longer feel like emergencies. Decisions that don't come with the same weight in your stomach. A sense that you are no longer the only one holding the structure up. Let me be clear about something. This isn't about becoming wealthy overnight, it's about becoming steady. There is a big difference. Steady means your energy stops leaking into survival mode. Steady means you can plan without fear coloring every option. Steady means the future feels negotiable again. Have you noticed how different life feels when you are no longer constantly managing risk? That is the doorway opening. Astrologically speaking, Aquarius is deeply connected to cycles of pressure and release. You are built to endure intense periods, but not to live inside them forever. What's lifting now is the sense that everything depends on your constant effort. That if you loosen your grip, it will all collapse. It won't. Support shows up in quieter ways than you expected. A structure that holds. A system that stabilizes. An arrangement that doesn't drain you. You may even feel a strange discomfort with the ease at first. As if your body doesn't quite trust it yet. That's normal. When pressure has been your companion for years, relief can feel unfamiliar, even suspicious. But this easing isn't temporary, it's corrective. It's life recalibrating after a long stretch of imbalance. Ask yourself this gently. What would you do differently if you knew you didn't have to carry everything alone anymore? That question matters. Because as the weight lifts, your choices begin to shift too. Not because you force them to, but because your inner posture changes. You stop reacting, you start responding. And something important happens when you are no longer operating from tension. Your clarity returns. You see options you couldn't see before. You feel trust where there used to be doubt. You remember that your intelligence works best when it isn't rushed. This is the kind of change that doesn't need announcement. It proves itself quietly over time. Stay present with this moment, because the next layer of this story isn't about relief alone. It's about what becomes possible once you finally have room to breathe. Aquarius, when the pressure begins to ease, something quiet but powerful follows. You start noticing what no longer drains you, not in a dramatic way. More like realizing the bucket you have been carrying has fewer holes than before. For a long time, money moved through your life too quickly. Not because you were careless, but because it was always assigned somewhere else before it ever had a chance to settle. Responsibilities, unexpected needs, emotional decisions made in moments of tension. You were solving problems in real time, not building peace. What shifts now is not the amount coming in, it is what stays. There is a relief that comes when money stops leaking through fear. When you no longer make choices just to quiet anxiety. When you are not constantly correcting yesterday's emergencies. This is a different kind of blessing. One that doesn't announce itself with excitement. It arrives with calm. You may feel it when your account balance holds steady longer than usual. Or when a recurring expense quietly disappears without a fight. Or when work begins to feel more predictable, less reactive. Stability is deeply healing for someone like you. Aquarius does not need excess to feel safe. You need flow that makes sense. You need systems that respect your energy. You need space to think instead of constantly adjusting. And as this steadiness settles in, something important happens inside you. Your body relaxes. You sleep a little deeper. Your thoughts slow down. You stop scanning for the next problem before it even arrives. Have you ever noticed how much clarity returns when you are no longer bracing? That is the gift here. You begin to trust yourself again with money, not in a reckless way, but in a grounded one. You stop saying yes just to feel secure. You stop holding on to things that cost more than they give. You begin to sense what is sustainable and what is not. This phase does not require you to win big. It asks you to stop bleeding quietly. There is wisdom in that. You may find yourself restructuring without effort, adjusting how income comes in, rearranging priorities, letting go of something that once felt necessary but now feels heavy. None of this is forced. It happens naturally when fear loosens its grip. And for the first time in a long while, money stops feeling like a test. It becomes a tool it gets support, a companion, something that works with you instead of against you. This is why the relief feels so physical, because it is not about numbers. It is about safety returning to your nervous system. Ask yourself this softly. What would it feel like to trust that what you earn can actually stay with you? That question opens a door. Behind it is a version of you who no longer lives in constant correction mode, who makes decisions from clarity, not fear, who feels anchored instead of stretched thin. And once that anchoring begins, something else prepares itself quietly in the background. Because when stability takes root, growth no longer feels dangerous. Stay with that feeling. There is more unfolding from it. Aquarius, as stability settles in, something deeper begins to rise. Not excitement, not ambition, but recognition. You start seeing yourself differently, almost without trying. In the quiet moments, in how you speak, in what you no longer apologize for. For much of your life, you gave freely, your ideas, your time, your emotional intelligence, because it felt natural, because contribution mattered more than compensation. You told yourself money was secondary. That purpose came first. That meaning mattered more than measurement, and that belief was sincere. But it came at a cost you rarely named. When you consistently give more than you receive, something subtle erodes. Not your kindness, your sense of worth. You begin to normalize imbalance. You convince yourself it is noble. You accept less, thinking it keeps you aligned with who you are. But here is the truth that unfolds gently now. Respecting your value does not make you less human, it makes you sustainable. There is a moment when Aquarius stops proving usefulness and starts honoring presence. And that moment changes everything. You may notice it when you hesitate before saying yes, when you pause instead of automatically offering more, when you feel the weight of your experience and realize it deserves recognition. This is not ego, it is alignment. As your inner posture shifts, the outer world responds. Not because you demand it, but because you no longer betray yourself. People begin to meet you differently. They listen more closely. They offer better terms. They value your time without being reminded. And perhaps the most important change of all, you stop chasing what undervalues you. You decline invitations that once felt necessary. You walk away from dynamics that drain you. You choose dignity over familiarity. Have you felt that quiet confidence forming lately? Even if you have not named it yet? That is your worth recalibrating. Income follows value when value is embodied, not explained. When your boundaries become clear, money understands where it belongs. You are not becoming harder. You are becoming clearer. There is a maturity in this phase that fits you well. A calm authority. A sense of knowing what you bring without needing applause. This is especially powerful for someone who has lived through long periods of self-sacrifice. Because the healing here is not about taking. It is about receiving without guilt. Let that land. Receiving without guilt. You are allowed to be compensated fairly. You are allowed to be selective. You are allowed to let money reflect the depth of your contribution. And as this awareness settles, something inside you relaxes again. Because you no longer feel invisible to yourself. Ask yourself this softly and honestly. What would change if you stopped negotiating your worth before anyone else does? That question holds momentum. Because once you honor your value, opportunities adjust. They do not disappear. They refine. What comes toward you now feels different, more aligned, more respectful, less exhausting. And as this part of the journey integrates, another doorway begins to appear quietly ahead. Not loud, not rushed, but unmistakably right. Stay with me, there is still more light unfolding from this place. Aquarius, when your sense of worth settles into place, the world stops shouting at you. What comes next does not arrive with fireworks. It does not demand urgency. It doesn't pressure you to decide before you are ready. It feels quiet, almost easy to miss. This is the kind of opportunity that does not interrupt your life. It blends into it. Like a door you walk past at first, until something inside you pauses and says, wait. You have been conditioned to think opportunity must be loud, that it should excite you immediately, that it should promise more than it can reasonably deliver. But that kind of noise was never meant for you. What approaches now is different. It respects your pace. It does not rush your nervous system. It does not ask you to abandon who you are to fit into it. It might show up as a conversation that lingers in your mind longer than expected. A project that feels oddly familiar, like something you once imagined but set aside. A path you dismissed years ago because the timing was wrong back then. And now, without forcing anything, it returns. Not to impress you, but to align with you. This is where many Aquarians hesitate. Because you have learned to question ease. To mistrust what does not come with struggle attached. To assume that if something feels simple, it must be lacking depth. Let me ask you something gently. How many opportunities did you ignore because they did not come wrapped in urgency? This moment invites a different response. Instead of asking, is this big enough, you begin to ask, is this true for me? That shift changes everything. The opportunity forming now does not promise rapid transformation. It offers coherence. It fits into the life you are building, not the life you are trying to escape. It may not come from a new place. It may come from a familiar one seen with new eyes. From someone who already knows your capacity. From work that values consistency over spectacle. And because it is not dramatic, your mind may try to talk you out of it. You may hear the old voice asking if you should wait for something better, something louder, something more impressive. But your body knows. Your body relaxes around this choice. Your breathing steadies. Your thoughts stop racing ahead to worst-case scenarios. That is the signal. For someone like you, alignment always feels calm before it feels exciting. This opportunity does not need you to prove yourself. It recognizes you. It does not require you to abandon your values. It reflects them. And the more you allow yourself to sit with that recognition, the clearer it becomes. You are not missing out by choosing what fits. You are honoring what lasts. There is wisdom in moving toward what does not exhaust you. There is intelligence in accepting what feels grounded. Ask yourself this without judgment. What if the right opportunity does not feel overwhelming at all? What if it feels like relief? Because that is often how growth appears after a long season of strain. Not as a leap, but as a step that finally meets the ground beneath you. As this possibility settles in, another layer of healing begins quietly inside you. You start trusting your timing again, your discernment, your inner yes. And that trust prepares you for something even deeper, not a new opportunity outside of you, but a new relationship with yourself. Stay with me. There is still a truth unfolding that will help you understand just how much you have already survived. Aquarius, there is something important I want you to hear now. Not as encouragement, not as motivation, but as recognition. You were never wrong for feeling tired. There are seasons in life where survival itself becomes the work. Where getting through the day takes more strength than anyone sees. And in those seasons, rest does not come easily. Because responsibility does not pause just because you are worn down. You carried more than you ever explained. Not because you wanted praise, but because explaining felt heavier than enduring. You learned how to stay quiet, how to keep moving, how to be the steady one while parts of you were asking for relief. That does not make you weak. It makes you human. Somewhere along the way, you may have started questioning yourself, wondering why things felt harder than they should, why your energy dipped even when nothing looked wrong on the surface. But exhaustion does not always come from failure. Sometimes it comes from effort sustained for too long without replenishment. You were not falling behind. You were being consumed by a cycle that asked too much and returned too little. And yet, you kept showing up. You showed up for work, for family, for obligations you could not step away from. You showed up even when your inner world felt thin and stretched. There is a quiet courage in that, one that rarely gets named. Let me ask you something gently. When was the last time someone told you that simply staying here was enough? Because there were moments when just getting through was an achievement. Even if no one clapped, even if no one noticed, you did not fail those moments. You survived them. What you are feeling now is not collapse. It is completion. A cycle that required constant endurance is coming to its natural close. Not because you pushed harder, but because you have learned what that cycle had to teach you. You learned boundaries through depletion. You learned discernment through disappointment. You learned resilience through silence. And now, your system is asking for something different. Not escape. Not rest that hides from life, but rest that restores you within it. This is where healing becomes honest, not dramatic, not performative, just deeply real. You are allowed to admit that you are tired. You are allowed to stop romanticizing struggle. You are allowed to release the identity of the one who always holds it together. There is strength in letting go of that role. As this truth settles in, you may feel a softness return, a willingness to treat yourself with the same compassion you give others, a permission to slow down without guilt. That softness is not the end of your power. It is the return of it. Ask yourself this quietly. What if this tiredness was not a flaw, but a signal that a chapter has been completed? Because when a cycle of depletion ends, it leaves behind wisdom. And wisdom does not rush, it integrates. You do not need to prove anything anymore. You do not need to justify your pace. You do not need to apologize for needing ease. You are not broken. You are transitioning. And as you honor that truth, something gentle prepares to meet you. Not pressure, not expectation, but acceptance. Stay with that feeling. Because the way you close this journey matters just as much as how you survived it. All right, stay here with me for a moment. If you are listening to this right now, there is a reason your energy has slowed down instead of rushing ahead. Not because something is wrong, but because something no longer needs to be forced. Aquarius, you have spent so much of your life preparing for impact, preparing for loss, preparing for disappointment. Even when things were quiet, part of you stayed alert, like you were bracing for the next wave. And I want to say this softly. You do not need to brace anymore. This moment is not asking you to work harder. It is asking you to unclench, to stop negotiating with fear, to stop proving that you deserve relief. Because relief does not arrive as a reward. It arrives when the season changes. And your season, it is changing now. There is something sacred about the way this shift approaches you. It does not knock loudly. It does not demand your attention. It waits until your nervous system finally exhales, until your shoulders drop without you noticing, until you realize you are no longer arguing with life in your head. That is when receiving becomes possible. Aquarius, you were never meant to chase miracles. You were meant to be available for them. And availability is not about effort. It is about permission. Permission to believe that ease is not a trick. That support does not always come with strings. That you do not have to suffer a little longer just to prove you are strong enough. Let me ask you something gently. When was the last time you allowed yourself to imagine good things arriving without a catch? Because this next chapter does not need you on edge. It needs you open. Open enough to notice the quiet yes hidden inside ordinary moments. Open enough to stop dismissing what feels too simple to be significant. Open enough to trust that stability can grow without chaos announcing it first. There is a calm intelligence moving around you now. A sense of alignment that does not sparkle for attention, but settles into place like it always belonged there. This is not the energy of sudden luck. This is the energy of pressure lifting, of life finally meeting you halfway. And I know part of you still wonders if it is safe to relax, if letting your guard down means tempting fate. But hear this. Holding tension will not protect you from loss. It will only block your ability to receive what is already forming. You are not being tested anymore. You are being trusted. Trusted to stop questioning every good turn. Trusted to stop rehearsing worst-case scenarios. Trusted to accept that after everything you have carried, ease is not indulgence. It is balance returning. So as you move forward, do not rush. Do not overthink. Do not analyze every sign until it loses its magic. Just stay present. Stay grounded. Stay kind to yourself in moments where old habits whisper that you should worry more. Because miracles do not begin with money. They begin when pressure finally lifts. And when it does, Aquarius, you will feel it first as peace. All right, before you go anywhere, stay with me just a little longer. Because if this message found you tonight, it did not come to entertain you. It came to recognize you. Aquarius, there is something quietly powerful about the way you listen. You do not just hear words, you feel between them. You sense truth before it is proven. And that is why this journey was never about predictions. It was about remembrance. You are not late. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are standing at the exact point where effort softens into alignment, where survival gives way to receiving, where your life stops asking how strong you are and starts asking how open you can be. Let this land gently. Nothing is being taken from you now. Something is preparing to stay, and I know your mind may want certainty, dates, proof. a guarantee you can hold. But your soul already knows what your mind is still learning. The path ahead does not need force. It needs trust. Not blind trust in the world, but trust in yourself, in your timing, in the quiet wisdom that has carried you through every season you thought you would not survive. If your heart softened even a little while listening, that is your confirmation. If something inside you whispered this feels like me, that is your signal. You are not alone in this moment. There are other Aquarians listening right now, across different places, different lives, carrying similar weight. Different stories, same frequency. And when you leave a comment, when you share a single word about what you felt, you are not just interacting with a video. You are letting someone else know they are seen too. If this message resonated, stay with this space. Subscribe, not out of obligation, but out of alignment. Because this is not a one-time message. This is an unfolding conversation. And the next chapter it is already forming. More clarity is coming. More ease is coming. More truths, spoken gently, is on its way. Until then, take this with you. Trust yourself when things begin to feel lighter. Trust yourself when the old fear tries to return. Trust yourself enough to receive without apology. The journey does not end here. It continues quietly, powerfully. And the next message is closer than you think.